personal views and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are their own and are not legal advice or official statements by their organizations. Hello, my name is Debbie Reynolds. They call me the Data Diva. This is the Data Diva Talks Privacy podcast, where we discuss data privacy issues with industry leaders around the world with information that businesses need to know now. I have a special guest on the show, Sandor Slijderink. He is an expert CISO, says the Data Diva, all things information security. He's an educator. He's someone that I've known for many years on LinkedIn. I very much appreciate all that you do, the information that you put out. So I was really excited that you agreed to do this podcast, because I would love for us to be able to chat and be able to share kind of your work and your journey. So why don't you tell me, introduce yourself to the audience, and we'll start there.
Well, for folks that don't know me, I am. I've been doing this for about 30 years, from floppy to fiber, as I recently started to kind of acquire and adopt that kind of little slogan, catchy little catchphrase. But and I've done everything. I started off with bulletin board services and dealing with major BBS software and understanding telecommunications and operating systems, coding, programming languages. Up to now with the latest and greatest firewalls, fiber, policy, GRC, and you name it. I've done just about everything from digging in the trenches to, being a CISO twice. And I have learned a tremendous amount along the way from people like yourself, included. You've been one of my mentors from afar, so to speak. So it's an honor to be here with you.
Oh my goodness, that's so sweet. You're one of these people. You're like a Ginsu knife of like cybersecurity. So like, you know how to cut through kind of the difficult issues. You know how to really communicate, the things people really need to know. I think, and I want your thoughts on this. I think people are confused about cybersecurity, mostly in my view, because they don't understand that it's so diverse, right? It's not just one thing. Like for example, let's say someone says they're a doctor. Like, you don't assume, not all doctors do all things, right? But for some reason, when you say the word cybersecurity, people think you do everything, and that's just not the truth. So tell me just a little bit about that kind of way that the way that you describe what you do, and the way that you, like, for people who don't know, how do you tell them about cybersecurity?
So for me, I love using analogies because I think it helps people to kind of click and understand. But I look at cybersecurity as kind of like a vehicle. Okay, you've got a car. Each component of a vehicle has a different function and a purpose. Now, you have mechanics that work on this cybersecurity vehicle, right? But they don't work on the entire car. Some will work on just tires and wheels. Some will, then as they progress, they'll get into the brakes and then the axle and then maybe the transmission. Others will go the other route, and they'll start with windshields and, body and frames. Others will start with, focused on maybe the engine and the transmission and air conditioning systems. But in the end, you can't really have one person that can build a car from scratch by themselves. It takes an entire team to really design, develop, prototype, market, and eventually produce for the masses a cybersecurity vehicle. The same function goes within cybersecurity. There's a lot of us. I'm not a strong programmer. I don't deal with a lot of programming languages. I can read code and I can tell you what it says and what it does. But my focus, having started, was more on initially with networking, telecommunications, um, and then digging into operating systems as I grew along, and then working with compliance levels of what you need to do here and there. So there's not there's it's going to be really hard to find someone who's an expert on the entire cybersecurity aspect. And so for me, I've just chosen a few simple things that I push out, kind of my Big Mac, so to speak. Yes, I can do nuggets and fillet of fish and cheeseburgers and everything else as well. But my Big Mac is focusing on understanding why and what you need regarding information security, which includes data privacy.
Right. You did a post recently and you called me out. You had actually did a post of a couple of different experts in different domains, and I love what you said about me. I think you said data privacy, and I think that's probably very, very apt because I am a data person. I just decided to specialize in privacy because I think that's where I have the most impact. I think for cybersecurity, when I'm thinking about the threats that we face today, we're not ready. So people, um, companies, and I think we were chatting about this a little bit before we start recording, especially small to medium sized companies. They're just not in the right headspace for the most part in terms of what they need to do about cybersecurity. And part of that, I think, is this misidentified thought that somehow cybersecurity is only like firefighting or you only do it when something bad happens. So tell me a little bit about that issue in cyber.
So, especially with the small to medium size, the larger organizations have adopted and hired in individuals that know how to, create, design, manage, and flow a cybersecurity program within their organization. They've got industry experts. They're surrounded by people who know cyber, who know IT, who know, physical security, information security, the whole nine yards. The small to medium sized businesses, I've been one of those, a small business provider of security services. But when you're looking at it as an entrepreneur, let's say you're going to start up a printing press. You know everything about printing and how to push that printing material out and market and everything else. That's what you're focused on. You're focused on making money off of what you can do and what you have. Oftentimes it comes at the end of the first year and all of a sudden, the franchise tax board of the IRS sends you a letter and says, hey, you owe us money, you got to pay us. And now all of a sudden we have to learn a whole new realm. Well, the same thing happens for information security. They don't realize all the information they've been generating week after week, day after day, month after month. The contacts that they have at different, maybe publishers, clearinghouses, or book production, book companies, or authors and readers who wanted to buy their, whatever they're printing. So their mind is focused, and they're usually a small shop, usually 2 to 5 people kind of a thing for the first year or so, unless something, unicorn happens with them. But for the most part, that's where most small businesses start at. Their mindset isn't about security at all. Their mindset is access and sell, 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 sell. Let's make money so that we can get a bigger building. Oh, the printers, it's now 4 years down the road. And you know what? Our printing machine's about to be obsolete. We need to get a new one. Or do we spend that money on a cybersecurity program? Well, if you're putting it at that, do I pay for my car to get fixed so I can get to and from work? Or do I pay for the medication that my youngest needs so that they don't have epileptic seizures anymore? Which do you put off? Which do you put on the back burner and the front burner? And this is the decision you see in small and medium-sized businesses is, what's going to make me money? Because I've got a car payment, I've got a house payment to come up. My oldest is going to college. I need an extra few $1,000s and I need it now. And we always need it. We're always going to need that extra couple $1,000s. We're going to be chasing that extra couple $1,000s, even as a Fortune 500. But with the small to medium sized businesses, they're not seeing how much money an information security program can make them. Same printing press. Let's say you want to start printing material for the Department of Defense. They need pamphlets, they need little cards, they need things to work with. Well, if you don't know that you need to get CMMC 2.0 certified, level 1 even, just to make the business cards and the pamphlets about where to go and what to do, or the contracts, the DD 214 paperwork, whatever, they're not going to get those jobs. So now what you look at is, you find someone who they need to find a way to integrate information security so that it's not just a burden. And that's what they're truly looking for, is trying to find a way to make it not a burden, a financial cost, but a financial plus. And a lot of times it's because they don't see it. It's because we fail. We fail to show them that there is a way to increase your profits, to solidify your profits and hold steady your profits, even during times of like COVID and any other, recessions, depressions, et cetera, if you have strong information security. But more often than not, we come across as, you ever watch that old, I think it's a Trolls, I think it's made by Disney, is it Trolls with, trying to think of who's in it, but it's a troll movie, came out last 5, maybe 10 years. And there's this one troll always screaming, the Bergens are coming, the Bergens are coming. I honestly think that that's the way non-information security people see us that are working in information or cybersecurity. They just see us as, oh, you're going to get ransomware attack, you're going to hell, kind of a thing. And that's what they're seeing. So we're Bible thumping them with the CMMC or the NIST guide or the HIPAA guide or ISO compliance guide, whatever it is. And we're thumping them on the head, telling them the Bergens are coming, the Bergens are coming. We fail because that's how we come across. And the ones that win are our vendors who, roll up in their Porsche and their Rolex and, hey, I've got this beautiful firewall. It's chrome plated. It's got nice little blinky lights, great cooling fan. It'll never fail you. And they'll buy them up for $200,000 a pop left and right over and over and over again. Meanwhile, there's nothing in that box that's anything new over the past 10 years.
Right.
Firewall only does really 3 things. It opens, filters, and closes a port based on the rules that you put into it. Whether you access it from the front end, the back end, you have special monitoring and blinky lights or anything else. In the end, a firewall just does those 3 things. That's
true. Very true. Talk a little bit about the cloud. So the cloud has come along like gangbusters. Definitely a need for that, especially during the pandemic, where a lot of people had to really pivot from being on-prem to try and figure out how to sort of do things more remotely with different tools. But I think, in a way, and I want your thoughts about this, in a way, people took some of their bad information security behaviors and moved it into the cloud, which made it more risky. So tell me a little bit about that story.
Well, the cloud, and I've been, I'm not a huge supporter of putting things in the cloud always. I've softened my blow over the last few years. But, the cloud is a great place to test, develop, and even affordably expand on the fly for a sudden growth that you weren't expecting or planning on. So I think it's great for that. But we really should not be focusing all of our data and putting everything in clouds, because in the end, you look at cloud as someone else's computer. You really want to put that mindset, whether you're the DoD or your mom and pop Joe's pizza shop. Do I really want to store all the data, the secret recipe to our pizza dough or the nuclear codes on a cloud on someone else's computer. Okay. And truly understand that aspect of it. Is there a way to secure the cloud? There is. But realize that the more security you put on the cloud, the more it is going to cost. Cloud service providers provide a server, a hard drive space, and connections for you to store your data on. So in essence, they most of the time, unless you're like Rackspace or Nualat, the cloud service provider owns the server, they own the power that's being fed in there, they own the RJ45 connectors that are going in and out, they own the firewall, the building, the security, all the stuff, all the switches and routers and gateways and fiber and everything else that you've got going on inside of a data center, a cloud-based data center. We put our information on that. Now, while it's not necessarily true, ownership, possession is 9/10 the law of ownership, right? So we can get charged with possession of stolen property. But you rarely hear anyone complaining when they're in possession of good property, good data. So what do the big box companies have? They have all of our data that we freely put on there because we pay pennies to the dollar so that we don't have to store it in our own facilities. So they're technically the owner, 9/10 the law, owner of the data. And they've got bigger money than this, especially the small to medium-sized companies. So if a small company says, well, no, we want our data back, and big box company says, well, no, we own 9/10 of it. So we'll give you 10% of it. And we're going to take the rest. We're going to close up shop and we're going to open up in the Cayman Islands.
Yeah, right.
And that small business would be, SOL, so to speak, from trying to go after it because they don't have the resources and connections and understanding because they've been focused on the printing press for the last 10 years, trying to grow that and maintenance and hiring and firing and, customers and all that. So their focus has been lost, so to speak.
That's true. That's true. Let's talk a little bit about privacy and how that interacts with the cybersecurity domain. I think, especially, privacy has been around, but I think when the GDPR went into full effect in 2018, it became a C-suite issue, mostly because people were afraid of the fines that the companies could get, especially if you're handling data of someone in the EU. And we've seen it, I know a lot of my friends in Europe, they're very frustrated with GDPR because they feel like, they want these regulators to do more enforcement and do more fines and stuff like that. But it's been very influential around the world. We're seeing a lot of our laws, even at a state level, borrow liberally from GDPR. But I want to talk about how does privacy play in a symbiotic way in your space in cyber?
So, and I want to touch base. I can't remember her name for the life of me, but I recently watched a video I think it was last week sometime. It was a former head of data privacy for the Bank of America. And she presented this analogy that I thought was phenomenal. Think of data privacy as going into your home and closing all the blinds and the curtains. Now, if you're on the outside, you can't see it. Okay, it is private. However, you don't have security systems up there. So you don't have the security. So anyone can break in and take a look at the privacy and take the data that's inside there away anyway. Now, on the flip side, let's say you put bars on the windows, security cameras, alarm systems, et cetera, et cetera. You've now got a security system, but you haven't closed the blinds. So anyone driving by, they can't get to it, but they can see in there and they can see all the data that you have, plain text, no problem. and they can recreate and duplicate that data. So you have to really, when you're looking at data privacy and data security, you really have to pair them together and make sure that your blinds and your curtains are closed, as well as, that you've got security camera systems and alarm systems and bars on the windows to prevent people from unauthorized access, not just unauthorized visibility. So, you go into any programming language and there's, read, write, and execute are the three main functions that you apply to any piece of data. And you got to make sure that you block that read, write, and execute at the same time by utilizing data privacy functions as well as data security functions.
Very good. Very good. So tell me, what is happening in the world today that concerns you the most, either in cyber or privacy?
Concerns me the most. So many. It's hard to choose just one. But for the most part, that people are looking, it seems that organizations and people are either ignoring the fact that information security needs to be something that's applied to not just their organization, but also to their own personal life. The other element is that, especially with the larger companies, they're trying to find ways to circumvent having to be compliant, having to do things. So you have companies out there that have been heavily fined by, let's say, GDPR. Well, instead of making themselves GDPR compliant, they find ways that the GDPR no longer applies to them. Well, we're not going to do that, or we're going to sandbox that part of our company over there so that they handle that and we handle this. In some ways, they've resolved it, but more or less, it's more about trying to find ways to avoid prosecution and persecution from compliance measures, rather than to find ways to actually be compliant and actually enable that. And in some instances, they spend more money trying to circumvent the compliance and protecting themselves against coming after versus becoming compliant and becoming an example in their specific industry. If you had a hospital that was completely unsusceptible to ransomware and all kinds of things and had regular pen testing done to this hospital, that hospital would probably wind up on the news eventually saying, this is a pillar. This hospital, it's an almost an impenetrable fortress. That then makes that particular entity become a shining example of what you want to do and how you want to do it. But instead, we choose, as businesses and as non-information security people, practitioners, we choose to ignore, avoid, and circumvent as much as possible because it's seen as a burden, a cost, a burden on our wallets. And I think that concerns me. We know things are going to get bigger and faster. And I created a post a few weeks ago. If ransomware were to have a magic bullet tomorrow, it's not going to make those ransomware groups go away. They're going to find another vulnerability to exploit, another way to attack it. Because if you've been robbing banks for 5 years and making millions of dollars a year off of robbing banks successfully, and suddenly that comes to an end, you're going to find a new way to rob banks or a different bank to start robbing. So you're going to find you get different tools, a different vehicle, a different whatever's. It's not going to end today. Even if we stop all of that today, they're just going to find a new way to attack us and pummel us. And we're not getting attacked and exploited by something that's new. Ransomware first came out in 1989 via floppy. They're still doing it today, and we haven't learned, if we encrypt properly and back up properly and test our encryption and backup properly, that we will not lose and have to pay any sort of ransom. We wouldn't need cybersecurity insurance to pay for ransomware events.
Right.
We took the encryption key and we didn't put it on the server that's encrypted.
Right. Exactly. Oh my goodness. So I want your thoughts on what I call data hoarding. the corporate edition. And so this definitely data privacy regulation has a big influence here because in the past there was no legal reason for companies to delete data, right? So they could just keep data forever. There were there's still some statutory things to say, like you have to keep tax records for a certain amount of time or whatever. But the thing that data privacy regulation is bringing in is the idea that you need to tie your data collection or your data retention to a purpose. And once that purpose has expired, you're supposed to get rid of it or anonymize it or something like that. And we're seeing companies do a really bad job at this because I think they never had to think about this. So they never had to have the type of transparency that's being required now, and they never had to get rid of or delete data. So their idea is like, let's just keep as much data as possible, but we know that that increases their risk. So tell me a little bit about that story and how you work with companies around kind of their data risk of hoarding all this information.
So I'm trying to see if I have an example of that. But I have a box, a few boxes of old stuff that I've had since the 80s, an old hard drive that's like massive, weighs about 20 pounds. I've got old floppies. I've got old stuff that in the back of my head, when I go to try to throw it away, it's like one, it's memorabilia, but two, man, I might need this again. I might want to use this again. That's a lot of stuff. And you know what? My wife can't throw it away or sell it at the garage sale because I might need this. I might want this. Yeah, it's 20, 30 years out of date, or, maybe 5, 10 years out of date. But, you know, my mind says, we'll keep it. So we save money. So I can just, I'll install Linux on there, Tiny Core Linux or something like that, or DS Linux. And, you use it for my kids. Never get around to doing it because I've got a whole bunch of stuff. But meanwhile, I have a box of RAM sticks that, one, don't work for anything anymore because they're not the right size, and two, they wouldn't add up much even if I put them all in on one board. Wouldn't make as much RAM as what's on my smartphone. So I think a lot of that has to do with, we want to keep it just in case we can use it again. Maybe there's a way we can reach back out to these people and remarket what we have, or, sell that data somewhere to Cambridge Analytica or something similar to that. We can base sales volumes off of that, kind of like an old almanac. So I think there's a lot of reasons that those data controllers, data controllers and data processors maintain that data, is we might need to use it for something else. We could use this later on. Here's a project that we're going to put together in the next couple of years. And I think that's the mindset. We live in kind of a hoarding mindset, like, oh no, I don't want to get rid of, our bread until it's all gone, or till we see visibly mold on there. Especially if you live in a lower income, it's like, oh, there's a little bit of mold. I'll just tear that piece off and smear peanut butter on the rest of it, right? As you get older, you kind of look at it and go, well, there's one spot on the entire loaf, and you throw the whole loaf away.
Yeah, right, right. What's your thoughts about AI, especially like this generative AI, ChatGPT, is kind of taking the world by storm? Obviously, there are cybersecurity issues there. There are privacy issues, but kind of, I don't know. I don't know the best way to say this. So I don't know, there's a feeling here about what's happening. I feel like it's almost like when the commercial internet was created, right? Where people didn't know what to do, they didn't know what to think. People were trying to find ways to really leverage and utilize it. So tell me your thoughts about what's happening right now with kind of generative AI, your concerns on like either the cybersecurity or privacy front.
I think it's wrong for us to be afraid of it. It's inevitable. ChatGPT 4, by the time this airs, will have been out. And I've been reading some posts on what it can do. Supposedly, purportedly, it's getting released, I think, today or tomorrow. Um, but it's inevitable, and probably by the time middle of the summer of 2023, it's going to be ChatGPT 4 is getting released. Probably by then, it's ChatGPT 5. All right, we're getting closer and closer to quantum computing, to where it's affordable and accessible to at least the upper 50% of the population. We know that once that becomes adopted, the next milestone is going to be double that. So we're going to have quantum X2, processing power. Look at the processors, going back to the 80s and 90s. We went from the Pentium to the Pentium 2, the Pentium 4, and we went from single core to quad core, dual core, dual quad core. We just kept expanding and making things faster and faster, smaller and smaller. And it's getting more and more affordable. If we are afraid of it and we try to push it out of our mind, it's not going to go away. And we need to poke and prod at it and understand what is it doing? What's really going on in the background? Because to me, AI, even today, is still, AI and ML are still more mathematical equations and solutions. ChatGPT has changed a little bit of that. It's kind of put AI ML on, DuckDuckGo search engine, or Yahoo search bar, whatever. So it's giving you information that's already been presented and put out. I've tried ChatGPT and looked to see what the results come out of. It's about 90 to 99% accurate. But it's pulling the information that's already been put out. It's not creating that information. It's just referencing that information. And even when you go to the website for ChatGPT, who the CTO for that company is phenomenal. She's a genius. So if you ever get a chance to bring her on, probably should. But it's referencing something. So it's already been created. When you log onto the website, you're looking at, and it gives you a little disclaimer. Hey, this stuff's, the material you're being presented is 2 to 3 years old. Just so you know, it's nothing new. It's not something that came out yesterday. If you're looking for something more relevant, you'll have to do your research somewhere else. Something similar to that kind of a disclaimer. So in that model, just with that disclaimer, it's a reference model. It's just taken all the information and made it accessible either directly or via APIs or some other means of connecting to those databases that those search providers have built up themselves. So we need to not be afraid of it. We need to understand it, explore it, and know what it does so that we can work with it instead of combating against people to using it. It's a tool like anything else.
It is a tool. It is a tool. I mean, to me, it's almost like sometimes people kind of rage against some of these innovations because they see the downside, and we should look at it, right? We should look at the upside and the downside, and not put our blinders on. But that's almost like saying, people hit people with bricks, so let's like not use bricks, right? It's like, well, we use bricks to build houses and do other things, right? And I a lot of these arguments, I feel like we were making these arguments about the internet. I remember when the commercial internet came on board, some companies didn't want to use it, right? And we know that you just can't have a company at all most of the time now without using the internet in some way, shape, or form, right? So I think it kind of definitely evolves there. Well, one thing I want your thoughts about, and I feel like we tell people this all the time. It reminds me a little bit about how we try to tell people about phishing. Phishing has been over the years a very effective way for cyber criminals to really be able to infiltrate people's system. But people sort of fall for these tricks constantly. But the parallel I have there is, like a lot of people are saying, things like generative AI, companies are trying to stop people from using it because they don't want them to put confidential information into it or sensitive information. But I feel like we've been telling people to do this forever, right? It's like, we've been telling them this about the internet. We've been telling them this about Google Translate, or anything, smart speakers, don't put confidential information in it, around it, or whatever. So tell me a little bit about that story.
It's not just AI based, and ML based chat like ChatGPT. Microsoft recently released one to try and compete with it on their Bing side. So Bing's kind of making a comeback, I think, but maybe. um, it should follow along the same policy, especially the large corporations. Organizations should have a policy that says, hey, don't put any intellectual property, any confidential, unclassified information, federal contract information, any development items in any search place, whether it's ChatGPT or DuckDuckGo, or if you still use Google, I guess Google. But because they're watching, they're paying attention. And when someone comes up and goes, ooh, carbon core for aerospace, and someone starts putting the dots and looking at different things, well, the search engine you've used, regardless of which one, now has the data of what breadcrumb did you just follow? So regardless of whether it's ChatGPT, DuckDuckGo, or anything else, any kind of chat function, anywhere, even on LinkedIn, you start talking about these and starting putting that in there, then those breadcrumbs are going to start. Someone else is going to come up with that idea. They're going to realize, oh, that's what they're researching. That makes sense. Hey, Tim, can you do this? And then Tim goes, yeah, we can make this happen. And then John and Billy Bob and Jane and anybody else comes together and they start putting the whole thing together. They've got more money, especially these big box cloud companies. They see all that data, that 9/10 possession kind of a thing, whether it's legal or not, a legal term or not, officially. They have that information and they can use that information that you've just put on their servers. So ChatGPT is just another AI chat of any sort, is just another level of that. It's nothing new. It's mostly a search engine, and it's going to give you results that you want to see. So it's perfect for salesmen, for salespeople, but we want to not avoid it. We don't want to stop it. We want to work with it and use it, because as we can use it, the bad guys can use it too, which we can then use against the bad guys as well. We can see where this is coming from and ask those same questions. Hey, where are people finding this information at? Oh, it's stored here and there, and it'll reference places like Krebs on Security's website.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely think, yeah, you shouldn't like fold your arms and like say you're not going to use it. You need to know what it is. I tell people, and you see it in the news and they're reporting about it because people are going so crazy about AI now. All these tools that are coming up now, they're trying to incorporate some bit of AI into their tools because they think this is the hot thing. Let's kind of just roll with it. So, even people who try to avoid it, it may be incorporated in tools that you use every day, and you need to learn how to use these tools, know how to leverage them for what you're doing, or you're going to be like, digitally illiterate if you don't understand, right?
I love cars that are basic. Okay. Manual crank windows, manual locks, manual transmission, everything is manual. And it's, generally I've got to go to an older vehicle to get that. Nothing technology wise in there. Not because I'm afraid of technology in a vehicle, but because I realize that, you know what? If my car gets zapped with lightning, okay, driving down the freeway. If I'm in a non-technologically advanced vehicle, chances are my speedometer is still going to work because it's a steel cable attached. Okay, the rest of the car is still going to work. I'm still going to be able to unlock the doors and crank down the windows and move everything because everything is mechanically based. Um, there's fewer places to brake. Now you get a smart car, which really is just someone mounted a tablet onto the dashboard. It's got built-in GPS, and you've got an OBD2 sensor that it connects to, so it can see those sensors of anything you're pushing out for the OBD2 sensor. If you're into cars, you'll understand what that means. But that's why I love going to some of the older things, because they're going to be fewer to break. And the same thing goes with bolting on and adding on things just because they're gimmicky and everybody wants to see AI, ML. Well, this day and age, everybody pretty much knows that if you've got military grade something or another, that means it's just the lowest bidder won that contract for military grade, military grade security. Thank you, SolarWinds.
Very cool. Very cool. What would be your wish for either cybersecurity or data privacy anywhere in the world, whether that be um, uh, law, regulation, technology, or human behavior? What are your thoughts?
I'm pretty strong on this one. It should be with education and awareness, security education, security awareness. We have kids. I've got children ranging from 6 on up to 25, and I can tell you that with virtual classrooms, going to work, watching TV. Well, it's not even watching TV now; it's just streaming services. We don't even have cable anymore because all the streaming services you can think of, but we're not embedding and growing information security in our education. It should be taught before you even get into first grade. You should start to understand, hey, there's with my kids, I started them before they even got into first grade. They have a pin, they have a code on their tablets for them to access it. And then we have a master password that we can use to access it so that we can control and guide what they're doing on it, because they're going to go to it anyway. They're going to find a way to get into it. So I might as well give them access and provide them with enough ability to release that stress and that curiosity of what they want to do. Usually it's watching silly videos or something like that, or playing things like Roblox or Minecraft or My Little Pony Princess Rides Around or something. So I can control that and monitor that behavior. But I see it coming from the schools directly, where I got a mass email from one of the principals. No BCC. I now had everybody's email address from all the parents that went to that school that were in first through sixth grade. Every single one of them. I'm like, oh, okay, I can copy and paste and use this. You have kids that go to VPrep. I could craft a really nice, phishing email based on just that and probably be 90% effective. It needs to be within education. We need to put information security in education because it does not exist. I know there's some people that are, there's data privacy rights and digital privacy rights and et cetera, et cetera. But schools have information that should be HIPAA compliant. They collect payment card instrumentation, so they should be PCI compliant. At the very least, they need to have those two items, so there's some security that needs to go in there. But I truly believe there's one aspect that we need to focus on. It's pushing information security practices and understanding within the education system, and starting them at kindergarten, first, second grade. I mean, it's got to be imperative, and not just once a month. It's not, don't treat it like sex ed where you just get it once in sixth grade and then we're done with it, kind of a thing. We want to put it in so that they have it as, part of a regular ongoing curriculum. Make it a course that you understand information technology and the security. how to use your devices, you know, teaching them about meta tags, GPS locations based inside your pictures, and why you shouldn't do this or that, social media. I mean, there's so many avenues within an information security education platform that you could build in, and you can build it all the way from kindergarten on up to, you know, master's cybersecurity students like, you know, David over at UT Austin or George Bailey at CyberTap over in Purdue.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, I saw that you're teaching at University of Texas, Austin. I think I'm going to do a guest spot with them as well. But what you said is absolutely right. I hadn't thought about it in this way. I feel like the fact that we are struggling with cybersecurity issues at all is because it hasn't been taught. It hasn't kind of been folded into everything that we're working on with data. So that makes perfect sense. And I hope to see that definitely from the very beginning. People need to understand that they have data. Data needs to be protected. And if you get them into those habits, they'll be kind of less susceptible to some of the more harmful things that happen.
Well, and as our children grow up from 7, 8, 10, 12, 14-year-olds, and then we become older and older, and we wind up going into our nursing homes or convalescent homes or whatever the case may be, or our parents are going into that. Our kids can then help and manage that information security practice also, and push that into our parents or even into us as we're retiring and you know, about to leave this earth. That is where true information security is going to make a difference, is that we need to have a foundation of information security in everything that we do. It's not something, oh, don't talk about files in the elevator. And then someone goes, well, they said, don't talk about files in the elevator, but they didn't say anything about an escalator. So I'm going to talk about the files on an escalator just because it wasn't mentioned. And that's the way we think today is, okay, we look for the loopholes. What can we do? You know, versus, well, how can we make this stronger? You know, oh, we're HIPAA compliant. Okay, great. So you have 256-bit encryption on your data. You know, can we increase that at all? 2048 possibly, kind of a thing. And it's free, but it's gotta be. We've got to start building that foundation of information security within all of us as children, so that it becomes just as every day is how you use a fork and how you write in cursive, or how you turn on your phone or brew coffee. You know, it's got to be second nature that, wait a minute, that's not right. You know, don't talk to strangers. We tell our kids not to talk to strangers. And our kids eventually grow up and won't talk to strangers most of the time. So, you know, we've done great at that, but we're not applying it to information security, which is the realm that we live in today. Everything, we know more about people on the other side of this planet than we do right next door to us, half the time.
That's true. Very true. Wow. This is amazing. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show. It's an honor to be able to have you impart this information. That's so smart. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm sure we'll chat. We'll chat more, as always, on the internet about other things. But thank you so much. This is great.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. And it was my honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, all right. Talk to you soon.